Okay, from the top. I want to start this review by discussing my relationship with Persona 5 as a franchise. I've been following the series ever since Joker got into Smash Bros., but I only recently got around to playing Persona 5 Royal back when I got a PS5, and I was immediately hooked by it. The characters were stellar, combat was fun and engaging, and the themes of breaking out of the mold society has made for you, only to forge your own identity, is something that I can relate to greatly. When it was rumored in June of 2023 that P5 would be getting a tactics-based spin-off, I was ecstatic. My only exposure to the genre beforehand was Fire Emblem Three Houses, which I ultimately ended up dropping because I didn't vibe with the social sim aspects.
Wait, don't you like the social sim elements in Persona?
Yeah, which is weird why I didn't like it there. But the part of Three Houses I loved the most was the gameplay. Each stage was like its own little puzzle, and it was really fun for me to figure out the best way to maneuver my units to achieve victory. So being able to experience the genre again with a Persona 5 can of paint was something I was really looking forward to. Plus, Persona 5 Strikers, another P5 spinoff I played, set the bar pretty high for what these spinoffs could be, so I was hyped for seeing the direction this game would take. And then the trailer leaked 2 days early. And the art style was shown. And my hype immediately died. For context, Atlus released a series of spin-offs on the 3DS called Persona Q. These games are rather infamous for the cartoony, chibi art style, flanderizing the characters down to their most basic traits, and worse, ending in a memory wipe, which effectively renders the game's events pointless. So when I saw the art style and story direction of Persona 5 Tactica was taking heavy inspiration from the Persona Q series, I was not very happy. Despite this, the gameplay still looked like it had potential, so I wanted to go into it with an open mind in hopes that I could be proven wrong. Did Tactica do that? Only one way to find out. Before I begin though, I want to quickly put up a spoiler warning. The game assumes that you've beaten the final boss of the original Persona 5, and the Repaint Your Heart DLC assumes you have knowledge of Royal. As such, I will be discussing Tactica with the same assumption, and will be spoiling various plot points from Persona 5 as well as Royal, excluding the third semester, so if you have any interest in playing the original, click off this video and come back once you do. For those who have, or just don't care, let's get started. Tactica takes place during the final months of Persona 5, after the Phantom Thieves have beat Yaldabaoth, the God of Control. But whether or not Royal's third semester happened or not is unknown. The Phantom Thieves are hanging out at LeBlanc when they're suddenly isekai'd into another world. This new world is ruled by a vicious dictator named Marie and her army of legionnaires. Not long after encountering Marie, she puts the Phantom Thieves under her control, with the exception of Joker and Morgana. However, just as she's about to fix that, the two are saved by the charismatic leader of the local resistance group, Irina, and with her help, they set out to free their friends, depose Marie, and find a way back to the real world. For the first half of the game, the story is fairly simple. You fight battles, free your friends, and Irina occasionally drip feeds you information about this world. Very early on though, you do meet the emotional core of this story, Toshiro Kasukabe, a candidate for Japan's next prime minister. Toshiro mysteriously went missing not long before the game started, and it seems that Marie has a particular reason for locking him up, but that's getting into spoiler territory, so I'll cover that later. For now, just know that I think the story is serviceable. It's not deep or thought-provoking like the original, but it does do a great job of keeping you engaged throughout and grow attached to the characters. Speaking of which, let's discuss them next. My biggest fear going into Tactica was that, given the Q-inspired art style, the Phantom Thieves would be boiled down to, and defined by, their most basic character traits. Ryuji is a hothead. Yusuke likes art. Futaba is pro-Haxor, who make cringe gamer jokes, and so on and so forth. However, I'm pleased to report that their personalities are actually more than that. Except Futaba. I swear to if you make a gamer joke one more time. While they do still fit their archetypes, the story gives them time to react to various situations and apply their own experiences to them. For example, it's revealed right before the final confrontation with Marie that the shadow version of her is a reflection of Toshiro's real-world fiancé, who's only marrying him for political power. Haru is then able to identify with Toshiro because of her own experience of being in an arranged political marriage with an abusive partner. Moments like these show that continuity was taken into account when developing the Phantom Thieves, and they aren't the one-note cardboard cutouts they were in Q2. Unfortunately though, the Phantom Thieves aren't really central characters to the story. They participate in it, but they exist solely to facilitate the development of the new characters, so I may as well discuss them. Toshiro is a character who rubbed me the wrong way when he was introduced. His cowardly nature and general demeanor were really annoying, especially when the game constantly cuts to him freaking out. However, as the story progresses and you move past Morie, you learn more about Toshiro and why he turned out the way he is. I'll get into specifics when I go into spoilers, but for now, just know that he gets significantly better as the story continues. The main highlight though is Irina. From the moment she's introduced, she exudes charisma so infectious, it's impossible not to like her. She's obsessed with the idea of freedom and revolution, set on toppling tyrants like Marie and making the lives of the oppressed better. And the best part is, you can tell that she's completely genuine in her ideals, to an almost naive degree, and the way the game presents her struggles makes you really root for her and want to see her succeed. What also helps these characters are the stellar performances of the English voice cast. All of the original actors from Persona 5 return for this, and they are bringing their A-game. But the real stars of the show are the new characters. Kat Protano is delightfully devilish as Marie. She eats up every scene she's in and is incredibly fun to watch. Despite my reservations about the character, I couldn't deny that McLeod Andrews did an amazing job with Toshiro. He sells the scenes of Toshiro cowering really well, but he especially shines when the character gains more confidence. And then there's Irina. While watching her streams, it became very clear to me that Liana Albanese is a die-hard Persona fan living out her dream, which goes even further to sell the character's enthusiasm. All of these great performances work together to make the game even more entertaining. But I've talked long enough about the story and characters. Let's get into the reason why you're probably playing Tactica in the first place. The gameplay. In a surprise to literally no one, the gameplay of Persona 5 Tactica is the best part. Tactica is a strategy role-playing game which is very similar in concept to chess. Characters are put in a grid-like space where they have very limited movement ranges, and the goal from there is to clear stages that have various objectives. These can range from reaching a goal or surviving a certain amount of turns, but more often than not, you're tasked with defeating every enemy on the field. 9 times out of 10, enemies will hide behind cover, which make them resistant to physical or gunfire attacks. The way to get them out of cover is to use your persona's unique elemental skills to inflict status effects. Once the enemy is out of cover, any subsequent attack will result in a critical hit, and knock the enemy down. This then results in the character who knocked them down getting a 1 more, to pile on additional damage, or use the time to set up a triple threat. Triple threats are this game's version of the all-out attack from the main series, where your party is set in a triangle formation to deal massive damage to the downed enemy and anyone else caught in the crossfire. What makes these kind of games fun to me is that each map is kind of like its own little puzzle to solve. Sure, you could do a triple threat, but that might leave a character open to a critical hit from another enemy, so perhaps it's better to hide behind cover and pile on damage to another enemy instead. The possibilities to complete each map are truly endless. Next, I want to touch on what is probably my favorite part of the gameplay: the skill tree. When completing maps, your party earns skill points that you can use to upgrade their skills. On the surface, this has a pretty standard layout. However, what makes these skill trees special is that once you upgrade something, it isn't actually permanent, and points can be reallocated at any time. This offers so many more customization options, as your party's moveset can now freely change depending on the situation. For example, you can get very powerful skills like Aegon or Zeodyne very early into the game. However, it will be at the cost of sapping away all of your character's SP, so it should either be used as a one-time quick KO, or points can be reallocated towards weaker versions of the spell, but have damage increased through boost passives. Or maybe you think your points are better spent increasing your movement and HP recovery options. This dynamic flow kept me invested in the game's combat system, always wanting to see how different loadouts would fare against different enemies. Speaking of which, let's discuss them. There are 3 main Legionnaire variants that will recur on most every map, with 3 more showing up sporadically. The basic Grunt does weak damage to a target and will show up most often. They also have a Captain variant that I think has more health, but can hit from a farther distance and hit multiple targets. Brutes have low movement ranges, but whenever they're hit, they perform a slam attack that moves them up a few spaces. However, once doing the slam, they're always susceptible to a 1 more. I often find myself purposely luring brutes into range, and then having another character knock them down. The last of the normal enemies are the little drummer boys. They have a standard projectile and can do stuff like a charge attack or cast Zeodyne on later maps, but most of the time they'll either heal or cast Tsukukaja to increase their allies' movement ranges. If they cast Tsukukaja on themselves or grunts, it's not that big of a deal. However, if they cast it on a brute, you might be in trouble, so it's important to take them out ASAP. The other 3 enemy types show up less frequently and are more or less level gimmicks. Ninjas teleport all over the place, and can even teleport you if struck by an attack, or if they just feel like it. Their teleport, though, actually has a funny effect, where it actually works in your favor. They have a chance to teleport you pretty far away, which can often result in you being closer to an enemy formation that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get to on that turn. If positioned correctly, you can then set up a triple threat with a larger area of enemies within it. Sumo wrestlers are bulkier than brutes, and like lobbing rocks and enemies at you. They're not hard per se, but they're often in hard to reach places of the map, and have really large health pools, so taking them down is more annoying than anything. Finally, geishas will hold an umbrella that blocks attacks from either the right, left, front, or back, and shooting them from an opposing side will instantly knock them down. While I do wish there were more enemy types, what's here I feel is serviceable enough, especially since different formations work to challenge you and tackle them in different ways, such as this map, where you need to reach 2 sumos that are in a very awkward position. But good luck doing that, as the path forward is guarded by geishas and brutes. Finally, I want to discuss what you can do out of combat. When not fighting battles, your team regroups at their hideout, which typically takes the form of Café LeBlanc for the real world. The 3 main things you can do here is craft weapons, which isn't really that useful for reasons I'll get to in a second, take on challenging side quests, and talk to your enemies for additional skill points. The conversations, while humorous at points, aren't really anything special, and I just recommend doing them for the skill points. The last major part of both the hideout and combat is a Persona series staple, the Velvet Room, a place where you can perform fusion to obtain more personas. However, the Velvet Room has gone through a drastic overhaul in this game. See, every party member can now equip multiple personas, not just Joker. In fact, they can have 2 of them. Their base ones, so Arsene, Captain Kid, Carmen, etc., and a sub-persona that's obtained through fusion. This is a mechanic borrowed from the Q series, and I feel it's very limiting in Tactica. This is because sub-personas can only have 2 skills, their base skill, and one that's passed down through fusion. Most of these skills are passives that do stuff like increasing damage if certain conditions are met. However, most of the personas I fused ended up with the support skill Tsukukaja. Yes, for the first time since SMT Nocturne, Tsukukaja is broken. It increases the movement range of characters by a lot for 3 turns. And in a game all about movement, why wouldn't you want this skill? This unfortunately disincentivizes fusion experimentation though, as when something is this good and it's handed to me on a silver platter at level 10, I want to make sure it's on me at all times. And if a persona happens to have a really good base skill on top of that, that's just a bonus. The other feature of the Velvet Room is fusion weapons, where you can take 2 personas and fuse them into a weapon that have higher power and can inflict status ailments. This kinda makes the shop obsolete, as being able to inflict status effects with weapons is a great way to conserve SP. All in all, the gameplay of Tactica is incredibly fun and engaging, with several nuances that make it more complex than it might initially seem. It's more than enough reason to buy the game, as you'll have a great time in devising strategies and securing victories. Before I go into main story spoilers, I want to talk briefly about the Repaint Your Heart DLC, and I am once again going to reiterate the spoiler warning. While I won't be discussing the third semester in great detail, I will be spoiling a major plot twist from the original Persona 5. If you have not seen it, please play Persona 5, then come back to this video. The DLC takes place in the middle of the casino arc of Persona 5, which is also before the events of Tactica, and it features the fan-favorite pancake-loving detective Goro Akechi, and the trademarked Atlus re-release waifu from Royal, Kasumi Yoshizawa, as playable party members. Akechi has been investigating grotesque murals that have been appearing all across Tokyo. Kasumi happens to discover one near LeBlanc that depicts Arsene, Joker's persona, being mangled by a monster, and soon after, her, Joker, and Akechi are all isekai'd into an urban-inspired battleground ruled by a murdered street artist named Guernica and her bird Jerry. The main gameplay gimmick of the DLC is that it's essentially Splatoon. Everyone's attacks now cover the arena in paint. This paint has the unique property of rendering cover completely useless. Yup, that's right, you can now hit enemies with critical hits even when they stand in cover. Likewise, you can get crit if you stand on the enemy's paint. It's a fun gimmick, honestly, but the enemies seemed way more adept at taking advantage of it than I was, and this resulted in a bunch of cheap shots that put me in some tight spots. The presentation, though, is really great. All the maps are stylized like it's an urban battle royale, and I honestly can't get enough of how cool it looks. Additionally, the music goes way harder here than in the base game. Just listen to some of these tracks, they're great. Finally, Robbie Daymond and Laura Post haven't missed a beat as Akechi and Kasumi since they last showed up in Royal, and it's really cool to see them back and better than ever. The story, though, doesn't do them any favors. It's not bad by any means, but it's hindered by when it takes place in the timeline. The two central characters to the story are Guernica and her sister Luca. It's revealed later that Guernica is being controlled by Jerry, in order to make art that will kill people if they touch it. This parallels how Akechi was used and abused by those in power, which drove him to mass murder on their behalf to eventually get close to get revenge from the inside. Meanwhile, Luca is set on redeeming her sister no matter what, which mirrors Kasumi's relationship with her deceased sister Sumire. These are interesting avenues to explore. However, they can't reach their full potential because of the timeline. Since Atlus is set on not spoiling Royal's third semester, we can't have Akechi and Kasumi at the height of their character development. However, because Atlus really wanted to sell these characters with the DLC, they contrived this story in a time period that hinders its potential. Akechi hasn't been revealed to be the traitor yet, and the third semester hasn't happened to kickstart Kasumi's character arc. And the worst part is, this is actually the only time it could have taken place, as during the next arc, Akechi is evil. The one after that, he's dead. Then he's brought back for the third semester, but then he's dead again by the end. Maybe. So this, along with a memory wipe, is the only way to make this story work without compromising the canon or revealing Akechi's fate post-Royal. Imagine how cool it would have been though to have Black Mask Akechi relate to Guernica's struggles of being mistreated by society, or Luca's determination to get her sister back resonating with Kasumi. Regardless, this is what we have, and like I said, it's still good, but if Atlus wasn't so determined not to spoil the third semester, it could have been so much more. And as it stands, I honestly can't say it's worth the $20 price tag. Oh, come on, Atlus, I thought you learned from Soul Hackers 2. Well, at least for being the DLC, you can play as Akechi and Kasumi in the main game. In New Game Plus. Bummer. Also, quick side note, don't play the DLC until you've cleared at least the second area of the main game, as the post-credit scene spoils some stuff from it. But with that out of the way, let's finally discuss main story spoilers. As I alluded to before, Marie is a reflection of Toshiro's abusive fiancé. As such, anyone who's played P5 before can likely deduce that this dimension is Toshiro's palace, a realm born from the heart of distorted desires. However, unlike the villain-centric palaces of P5, this one takes more inspiration from Persona 4, where the dungeons reflect the character's trauma and insecurities. This is further amplified when we beat Marie and are transported to another area ruled by a manifestation of Toshiro's father, an elder statesman who strictly dictated Toshiro's life ever since he was young to become Prime Minister. We also learn that Toshiro's mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness and collapsed one day after a young Toshiro dragged her out of the hospital to go to an amusement park. She died later that day, and Toshiro is blamed by both his father and himself for the incident. This was honestly really sad to watch, as no, it wasn't Toshiro's fault. He just wanted to spend a day with his mom, and had no idea this would happen. And the fact that his father blamed him for it is just so sickening to me. But at least Toshiro is able to find closure with this manifestation of his mother, while simultaneously standing up to his father. However, the next area is going to be the hardest one for the character to overcome. Instead of being inspired by a time period like the French Revolution or feudal Japan, it instead takes the form of a school. Through beating the stages here, we collect various artifacts that give us a glimpse into Toshiro's past. Toshiro was the student council president at his high school, one with a righteous sense of justice who wouldn't let others get hurt. This trait catches the attention of a recent transfer student named Eri Natsuhara. Wait. Eri Natsuhara. Eri Na. Oh. Yep, this girl is the basis for Arena, but more on that later. The two become fast friends and begin performing good deeds around the school to improve student life. However, they also uncover a conspiracy where the vice principal was blackmailing students and teachers to gather dirt on each other, all for his own gain. The two are eventually able to form a rebellion against the VP and get him outed from his position. However, this story doesn't have a happy ending, as one fateful night, the VP has a psychotic breakdown and... Eri miraculously survives but is crippled. Toshiro blames himself for this, and has doubts that what he even did was right. This doubt manifests itself as the boss of this area, Toshiro's own Shadow. Shadow Toshiro believes that Eri, now manifested as Arena, is the root cause of Toshiro's trauma, and by eliminating her, he can be free from the guilt. However, Arena is able to remind him that despite the short-term consequences, their long-term actions did succeed in making the school a better place. And it's with this realization where Arena becomes Toshiro's persona, Ernesto. And with help from the Phantom Thieves, Toshiro is able to overcome his shadow and become a better, stronger man. And with that, the story of Persona 5 Tactica comes to a close. Persona 5 Tactica is a story about adversity and standing up for what's right. Erina's rebellious spirit and Toshiro's challenges exemplify this, as the change the former is able to bring to the cognitive world, and the latter's... Wait. What do you mean it's not over? Yup, in a Persona series tradition, it turns out everything was all the evil plan of a malevolent born from a base desire of humanity. The flavor of the day this time is Samael. Actually, it's Salmael, but much like this guy, I'm too lazy to change the script. a being born from humanity's desire to be protected and not hurt. Sounds good on paper, but the problem is Sammy has a very narrow view of protection, and deems any kind not his own to be a threat. As such, he sends pawns to break the wills of those whose ideals conflict with his own. This is actually what happens with Guernica and Jerry in the DLC, but Toshiro's cognition created Arena to fight back, causing Samael to take drastic measures and drag Toshiro into his own mind. The Phantom Thieves only got caught in the crossfire because Toshiro associates LeBlanc with comfort, and just so happened to will them into his palace unconsciously. Regardless of reason, holy cow, this last arc is garbage. The story and theme setup previously are completely thrown out the window because, oh boy, we gotta fight again. What doesn't help is that despite how much the game tells us otherwise, Samael is literally just a carbon copy of Yaldabaoth, the final boss from the original Persona 5, who even had very similar motivations. But for as flat as Yaldi was, at least he was foreshadowed throughout P5. Samael literally shows out of nowhere because final boss, and it is so jarring. Like, why did they do this besides tradition? Why couldn't Shadow Toshiro have just transformed into Samael, and then we could have had like a big final battle, reminiscent of Persona 4, Toshiro accepts his shadow, but no, that is not what we get. Instead, we're left with a bland final dungeon with shallow rematches against the bosses, and a final boss who is even worse. Also, side note, he has this one attack where he summons clocks, and the effect is so unnoticeable that I didn't even know what it did until TLGR explained it to me. I just wanted to point that out. But at the end of the day, the Phantom Thieves are able to beat Sammy through the power of friendship, and are sent back to the real world where we await the inevitable memory wipe. Wait, they remember? They remember! Yes! Seriously, I and many others immediately thought there was going to be a memory wipe because of the art style and when the game takes place, especially since the DLC set that precedent. But no, the Phantom Thieves actually remember everything, and even cheer on Toshiro as he publicly exposes his father for corruption and breaks off his engagement with Marie. This does come at the cost of his reputation, but Toshiro vows to work hard to regain public trust and be elected as Prime Minister. The story then ends on a positive note as Toshiro is reunited with Eri after many years.
Looks like I finally caught up.
I've been waiting.
Persona 5 Tactica is an amazing game. Fun and layered combat, endearing new characters, and even though the last act fumbles, the story has great themes of overcoming adversity and standing up for what's right. However, this game kind of had all of its cards stacked against it. I've avoided talking about this until now, but I think it's finally time to address the Gira Makala in the room. Tactica was announced alongside the remake of Persona 3, as well as the reveal of Metaphor Refantasio, the first new IP from Atlus in a long time. The hype surrounding these two, as well as low marketing and being released on the same day as the remake of Super Mario RPG, caused this game to fly under the radar for many, and the cartoony chibi art style didn't give a lot of fans high hopes for it. It's honestly really sad because I and many others came up with assumptions about this game based on how it looked, without the final product to critique it fairly. However, to everyone involved, I really want to apologize. I was wrong, and I'm happy about that. Persona 5 Tactica taught me to never judge a book by its cover, so through this video, I hope to accomplish the same thing I did with my Soul Hackers 2 video, and get more people to try this game. I guarantee you won't regret it. Thank you all so much for watching. I want to thank Robin for his cameo at the beginning, Eon for once again making the thumbnail, Steelball's Run for making the dump file for Tactica's 2D assets, and finally TLGR for providing me with the assets and being an amazing friend. Well, that's it for today's video. Please consider liking and subscribing to help build a community and spread awareness for this amazing game. Until next time, this is Japanator, signing off.